usually should be over a 2-year span, where you are going to over an asset that has perhaps 40 units. That, okay, we're planning this out where every 2 months, 3 months, we're anticipating we're going to raise the rents on these tenants, and X amount are going to leave. So that leaves us with whatever we need to do in terms of turn. So it's a process that lots of folks, when you step into this multifamily space, if you don't have that experience of understanding what those processes and systems are, then it can be there's a lot of struggles and a lot of pain. And that's where I help people out with.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Van Sturgeon is an experienced entrepreneur of over 30 years. He's successfully created several businesses in the real estate industry that cover areas of land acquisition, development, management, construction, renovation. I'm not sure what's on this list, Van, that you haven't done. But I just want to welcome you to the show today. Van, welcome.
Thank you very much, Sam, for bringing me on. I've been a fan of yours. I listen to your podcast, so I'm eager to jump in and talk the talk.
Pleasure's mine. Same 3 questions I ask everyone who comes on the show. Can you very quickly tell us, where did you start? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
Sure. I got started I was born and raised in Chicago, went off to university, broke my parents' heart, and that I could have been a lawyer, and decided I didn't want to. I wanted to get into renovation, general contracting. I started my business in the late 80s, and over a period of time, I stumbled upon this whole real estate flipping kind of stuff, and started dabbling in that, and that grew. And now I have a portfolio today of approximately 1,200 doors. I've got businesses in property management, home building, restoration, general contracting, and I've got some really great people in place to those businesses. I'm in a semi-retirement stage of my life. I've decided to slow down over 30 years. Decided, stop and smell the roses. So that's where I'm at. And right now I help multifamily investors through typically their first acquisitions and how to structure, plan, and successfully manage their renovations to their assets.
That's a very niche, how do I even put this? But that's a very niche, part of the multifamily process to dive into is the renovation side of it. Obviously, if you've got a background in construction, you still own construction companies, you guys are still doing renovations. What about that piqued your interest and said, oh, that sounds like fun. Let me go help people do that on their first acquisition?
3 years ago, I decided to sort of take a couple of steps back and spend more time with my family, because over the last 30 years, I've been passionate about what I was doing, and it sucked up a lot of time and took it away from family. So I decided that I wanted to downshift in my life, but became bored, Sam. And I started. I'm not a golfer. I'm not a guy who grabs a block of wood and whittles it to a coffee table. And I got a phone call from a friend who said, "Hey, I'm looking to renovate my property, and can you help me out?" And just like what I've done over the last 30 years, I helped my friend out, and I enjoyed the process. I enjoyed the adulation I received of having them save a lot of money, and it was a seamless, beautiful process. And so after that, I was talking to a real estate investor friend of mine who happened to be also a coach. And it's like, yeah, you'd be surprised at how many. I told him about my experience, and he's like, you'd be surprised at how many people are out there who struggle with this. Because on one hand, we all talk about, oh, money's made on the deal, right? Sure. To find a great deal.
Right.
But oftentimes we forget that, you can take a great deal, and all you need is to find a lousy contractor, not really assess the value, like what are the things you need to be done, or the repairs associated with that great deal. All of a sudden, that great deal turns into a real lemon. Right. And when you transition from single family home to multifamily, typically you are not only you're using your own money, but you're also looking out to friends, family, other investors to put together, the monies associated with making that down payment and whatever you're looking to do with that asset.
Sure.
And so not only now when you've got that commitment from investors, these are friends and family that you looked them in the eye and said, this is a great opportunity. We can make X amount of percentage, whatever the pitch is. And so now when you grab that asset and you're looking at all the things that are necessary to be done on it, and you realize, hey, this ain't Kansas anymore.
Mhm.
We got some things that we need to do here, and you're struggling with it. And that's where I step in and I help people through that process.
That's interesting. I mean, let's spend a little time there, because this is not a topic that we've really covered, I think, in depth at all. I don't know when this show will go live. This will be probably 90 or so, 390 episodes, and we've not covered renovations very heavily. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I mean, break it down for us. Somebody
and
comes.
unfortunately, Sam, I'm sorry, I'm just going to, like, that is what I find is right across, there's everybody glosses over this incredibly important, just as important as to find a great deal is you got to do something with that deal. And oftentimes we're buying ugly ducklings all the time. We're looking for the diamonds in the rough.
Right.
And so you got to spend money in order to make money, and spending that money when you're dealing with contractors that will tell you one thing and another thing, and you're struggling, you scratch your head wondering which direction to go. And I see that all the time. And as a general contractor, I've literally done thousands of renovations from balconies all the way to other parking garages and apartments. I've got that, that experience level to be able to guide people to say, no, don't listen. No, that's not what you should be doing. You should be doing that. So to answer your question, the first thing that when I sit down with folks is we always start with with the process of identifying the goals associated with this renovation or this property, this asset. Like, what are we looking at? Typically, it is we want to raise rents. If their rents are at $500, we'll want to raise them to $800. And that's wonderful to put that figure down. And in that due diligence phase, we kind of gone around and looked at other comparable properties, and we put together a number. And that was the number that we used in order to be able to do our number crunching to make a decision whether to purchase this property, this asset. But you got to really dig down into those goals to determine exactly what it is that you want to do, right? Whether it's elements in the common area or whether it's in individual suites. And so you really need to dial down, and that's the process I help people through in identifying out there in the marketplace, what is it that is driving the bus forward or getting you to that goal of whatever that goal is that you put together, that you've established, identifying those items and then incorporating that within the actual project itself. So goals is where we start off with. And then once we go into the goals, again, we go into the marketplace and validate that. Then we've got an idea of what it is that we need to do. Then we move into the budget portion. So we all, it's wonderful. We all know just pour money into something that it'll give us, but we don't have unlimited funds.
Right.
We have to be very selective. And that's another thing that I help people through, because there are certain items that can be done that deliver the much higher ROI than some other items. So it's wonderful to go ahead.
Can you pause there for a second and maybe give us some insight on that?
Sure, absolutely. So we often walk in assuming that we need to rip out the kitchens and rip out the bathrooms and replace the floors and all of those can the typical turn on a unit would be, if you went through all that expense, you can be up to 15, 20,000 depending on the size of in the suite, and that's a lot of money. Right. And sometimes it's warranted based on the amount of money that you pay for a property, but most often it's not, or you don't have the funds to do that. So one of the things that I help people through is that, if we're looking to raise rents, I find that the biggest bang for our buck, the highest ROI, is delivered through common area kind of improvements, where you look at a lobby, or depending on your asset. You look at the lobby, you look at the hallways, you look at the exterior of the property, landscaping. I've seen, relatively inexpensive expenditures, such as like adding a coating on the asphalt of the parking that all of a sudden makes it look like it's brand new. Stripe it, put some black coat down, all of a sudden it looks like you've done something. And then before you actually make the investment into those turns, perhaps maybe you should sprinkle some of these improvements, and then go to your existing tenants and start raising rents. And then sometimes you can get to that number, or a lot closer to that number, just by sprinkling these kind of token improvements to be able to raise rents.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a heck of a lot of sense. It's something where you can do one improvement that everyone sees and benefits from, versus remodeling one unit that only one tenant necessarily sees or benefits from.
Sure. It's a process. You have to put together a process of how you're going to go, execute this. And the execution can be, usually should be over a 2-year span, where you are going to, over an asset that has perhaps 40 units, that, okay, we're planning this out where every 2 months, 3 months, we're anticipating we're going to raise the rents on these tenants, and X amount are going to leave. So that leaves us with whatever we need to do in terms of turns. So it's a process that lots of folks, when you step into this multifamily space, if you don't have that experience of understanding what those processes and systems are, then it can be there's a lot of struggles and a lot of pain. And that's where I help people out with.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I felt like I cut you off mid-roll earlier. You were talking, you got right into saying, hey, these are some of the things we helped them figure out what to do, what not to do, and then you were going somewhere else with it. Do you remember where you were going with that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. With regards to that, like, once we've been able to figure out, and we already know what it is that we're, like, the monies that are involved, then we need to go into the whole asset and really bring out a sheet of paper, not a clipboard, and create a needs and wants list. And essentially that is identifying the things that we need to do immediately. So if there's a pothole in the parking area, that needs to be addressed right away, because we don't want people to trip and sue us. But then there's wants, like, oh, that ugly carpet in the actual bedrooms, I don't like it. But if it's not all torn up, that's maybe something that you park off to the side, and maybe you address if there's monies in the budget. But if they're not, then you're not going to do anything with it. So once we've been able to establish that needs and wants list, we have a budget, we have a goal, what we're looking to do to accomplish with this asset, then we move on to, I think the most underutilized item, which is creating a detailed scope of work. Sam, whenever as a general contractor in the commercial space, there isn't hardly ever a renovation that I don't price out that doesn't have a detailed scope of work. Now, that detailed scope of work can be created by an engineer, by an interior designer, an architect. There's typically a detailed scope of work, and that's how we price things out. What I find is definitely in single family home, like probably 95% don't have anything like that. But even in the multifamily space, I find that the individuals aren't going through the process of creating a detailed scope of work and don't even know what a detailed scope of work is. Right. Like, you know how many varieties of toilets there are, how many varieties of paints there are, and each one of them has an assigned value. Also, I want to be able to tell contractors and tradespeople that, hey, before you actually paint that wall, I want you to make sure that that's clean. Because if you paint it over a dirty wall, then that paint is just going to flake off, right, which means more money on top of that. These are the types of things that you should be putting in a detailed scope of work. These are things I've accumulated over 30 some odd years, but these are the types of things you should be putting in this detailed scope of work so that you put contractors and tradespeople on notice that this is what I'm looking for in my renovation rehab. And it's amazing what you attract when you have something like that and you tender it out in the marketplace, because then you'll attract good people that will appreciate the detailed nature of what you're looking for versus, oh, well, I'm just, this hopey-dopey kind of, laissez-faire attitude where, then you look at, because I had that. I don't deal with clients like that. In my time, I've built a successful business that I need to get into moving product. And so I don't like getting involved with individuals that don't have a clear understanding of what they're looking for, what they're looking to accomplish. And if I came across an individual that knew what they're doing, I want to have a relationship with that person because I make more money that way because I'm doing more turns, more renovations, right? So hopefully, so scope of work is something that I encourage. And then once we get to that, then it's the whole tender process and how do you strategize that. I can talk about this topic till I'm, for hours. Like, I find so many folks will rush to, dropping 50, 60% down payments to these GCs, tradespeople. And then once you've done that, Sam, you've lost control.
Right.
Like, where is this whole idea of, giving this lump sum money up front for something that hasn't been delivered? It makes no sense to me. But it's commonplace, especially now in this overheated real estate market where I find many people struggling. Oh, they're begging contractors and tradespeople to price out their jobs. And I'm like, no, I'm not begging anybody that doesn't make any sense. you lose no control, the whole control over it.
You're hitting on a few different things there that I think are really really important, especially on the scope of work side of things. At what point in this process, in the pre-buy or post-buy process or post-close process, are you developing that detailed scope of work? Is that before you ever buy the property? What's that look like? Because I mean, that to me sounds, I mean, yes, due diligence, but also sound like, oh my gosh, like that's weeks of intense work for one person going, okay, make sure the walls are clean, make sure, if we're replacing outlets, if we're whatever it is. I mean, you have to have somebody that really knows what they're talking about. And then secondly, it's a heck of a big job.
It is a heck of a big job, but once you've gone through the process once and then you can use that for the rest of the turns that you have. You've standardized something. Again, customization versus scaling. We want to get away from customizing. We want to get into the situation where we have something like a boilerplate that we just stamp out and something that we can tweak along the way, but we have something there that we know what we put everybody in notice is this is what we're looking for. Now, to answer your first question with regards to when to start that, the sooner the better, but typically that happens shortly after a close. You got the asset, and then you start going through that process of figuring out what exactly it is that you're looking to do. Some of the preliminary work can be done beforehand, like establishing goals, really validating those goals in the marketplace in terms of like exactly what it is that you need to do to your asset in order to get to that goal. That can be done prior to that. But then the nitty gritty is once you've got that asset, you're going to go in and oftentimes you've discovered things that you didn't really anticipate because you got the keys in your hand, right?
Yeah. So once you have, keys in your hand, that's when you're going in. That's when you suggest you really get the nitty gritty scope of work dialed down. How do you forecast budget for repairs or for CapEx without a detailed scope of work ahead of time?
Well, what I have as a tool is a renovation calculator that folks that I've developed for my own business, and I've actually made it free for individuals to be able to download also. And it's really excellent as a checklist, but also as a calculator to determine in rough sense what it is that we're looking for to have to put aside to the kitty toward that the renovation budget. And that can be devoted to common area improvements, but also individual suites. And that's where some of the difficulty comes for multifamily investors, syndicators, is that we have X amount of dollars, and typically those X amount of dollars aren't enough to address all of these improvements that we want to do. So which ones do we identify to get us as close as we can and as quickly as we can to that dollar figure of whatever that goal is in terms of raising rents, as an example?
Right.
There are situations where there's individuals that walk in that are looking to flip a property. So you'll structure your approach differently than if it's a buy and hold asset, right?
Sure, that makes sense. Hey, I want to touch on one other comment you made here before we jump into the final 4 questions. But you were talking about, how you don't want to be begging for contractors, and that's a common complaint right now. Just labor in general. How are you working your way around that scenario?
It's always, I akin it to even who've been in business for as many years as I have. The analogy that I use is that it's a big old bucket with a hole at the bottom. And you're constantly putting in contractors and tradespeople into that bucket, and then you'll have losses. There will be, there's a mistaken notion that once I've established a relationship with this one individual, that they're going to be there forever and ever and ever. And that's just not reality of life. Right. That young, aggressive kind of person that you might have met, and they're doing great work, all of a sudden gets overwhelmed by other people, other obligations and commitments, or they got married, or they got kids, or whatever. And all of a sudden, that person that was reliable, gave you great prices, all of a sudden isn't that individual anymore. Right. Also, we got to, depending on the type of work that we're doing, you need to structure the relationships with those types of individuals that can handle it. Like the guy driving around a beat up pickup truck is not the person that you're bringing in to do all the countertops in your 50 unit complex, right?
Right.
So we got to identify the parties that can do business and create those relationships, but constantly be on the look. And this is one of the things you always have to do. It's unfortunately part of the nature of the business. It's always keeping feelers out, always going through the process of tendering, always trying to create relationships with other individuals to be able to continue adding, trying to tweak the numbers and trying to reduce costs and just, it's a trial and error, and you got to keep doing that, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I like that you've just broken it down, simply that there's a hole in the bottom of the bucket. And having been in contracting myself for a number of years, I can just tell you that you're spot on correct. And yeah, know very well everything you've just said about how you think you can rely on someone, and for years you've done business together, and then all of a sudden, wait, where did they go? Why aren't they answering the phone? They've disappeared. Oh, crud. Like, now time to start over and find somebody else. So it's a constant and frustrating hunt, but that's as long as I guess you know the rules of the game before you get in. What else are you gonna do? So that's great. That is absolutely great. Van, let's jump here into the final 4 questions. You've given us a ton of things to think about today. The renovation side. Oh, before we do the final 4 questions, you said you had a free renovation calculator. Is there a place where our listeners can go find that, download that?
I've got my website. It's vansturgeon.com. To go on their website, aside from the renovation calculator, there's a bunch of resources that I've written over the years that have been published at Yahoo News and Yahoo Finance and places like that, and a bunch of podcasts that have appeared on talking about the same topic. So if there's individuals out there who want to download that or just learn more about the whole renovation process, I welcome them to go to my website and learn more.
That's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. All right, here we go. Final 4 questions are this. What is one tool or resource you find you can't live without?
I think the phone, the smartphone is an incredible piece of machinery. Like I remember the good old days walking around with a block phone and the pager and the beeper thing, and you had to call into a service and back and forth. And those days are gone now. At the fingertips, we got communication. I could speak to somebody in Italy, China, whatever, and it's amazing. There's always constantly things that we're looking to do in terms of programs and system. As technological things that are coming in, CRM, stuff like that. So, but really boil it down, the smartphone, man, it's amazing.
Absolutely. Love it. What is one, now let's see, Sam, where are your questions here today? They're walking away from me. Good grief. Oh, if you could help our listeners avoid one mistake in real estate, what would it be and how would you avoid it?
The one mistake that I made in real estate, was walking in, and I find often lots of folks, as a single family home side, it's expect that finding deals, they can find deals on good old MLS. So They crack open at MLS and they pour hours and hours into it, trying to find that great deal. But guess what? There's millions of other people doing the same thing too. And you're not going to find a deal there. You know where you find deals, Sam? You tell them, I know you've told them, you got to go out there, make relationships. You got to go out there with your real estate brokers, mortgage brokers, wholesalers, bird dogs. There's so many opportunities out there. There's deals all around us. And I hate when I hear people tell me, oh, there's just no deals. No, yes, they are. I look at deals all the time. My email box is filled. I deal in 4 areas in North America, and every single one of them, I created power teams and relationships with each of those areas. And I'm inundated with opportunities, and I pick and choose what I want to do. Right. And so when I hear the excuse of no, there aren't deals, no, there are. Get away from MLS, go out there and do some work. Yeah.
If you say there's no deals, you're right. So, I mean, that's just the way there is. Yeah, there's no deals because you're not looking for them. You're absolutely, it's like the person that says, I can't. Well, you're probably right.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of mindset, and there are opportunities all around us.
Absolutely.
There's a guy, who the knows the next street over, that individual struggling with their mortgage payments, and there's opportunities around us, man.
There absolutely are. Van, last question for you. I think we already answered this, but which is, if our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do that?
Well, I'm on social media. There's my website that I encourage people to go to. And I just love the interaction. I do this because I'm passionate about it. I enjoy it. And so if anybody has any questions with regards to whatever they're looking at accomplishing or doing, they're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I'll do what I can to help them.
Van, thank you so much for your time, and do appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Hey, thanks for listening to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate podcast. If you can do me a favor and subscribe and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever platform it is you use to listen. If you can do that for us, that would be a fantastic help to the show. It helps us both attract new listeners as well as rank higher on those directories. So appreciate you listening. Thanks so much and hope to catch you on the next episode.